The Caps regular season starts Friday night.
Your Locked On Capitals, your daily podcast on the Washington Capitals. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network. Your team every day.
Well, hello and welcome into this edition of Locked On Capitals. I'm so glad you decided to join me today. As always, this podcast is free and available on all the major platforms, including the SiriusXM app and on YouTube. And I want to thank you for making this your first listen each and every day. My name is Dan Holney. You can find me on Twitter. It's at DanCaps218. You can find the show on Twitter. It's at Locked On Caps. And the best way that you guys can help grow the show is to subscribe to Locked On Capitals on YouTube and comment anything down below. The Cap season has started, and I would love to talk Capitals hockey with you one-on-one. And we can do that. Just to check the show description where we can talk on subtext. Join me today. Today's episode is brought to you by Jace Medical. Empower yourself when you purchase a Jace case, providing you with a personal supply of 5 antibiotics that treat 50 plus infections. Get yours today at jacemedical.com. That is JASE medical.com. In today's episode of Locked On Capitals, we talk about era-adjusted goals. Yes, a new metric for measuring goals. We'll talk about how Ovi stacks up. A little bit later in the show, we will talk about how Alex Ovechkin has more on his mind than just catching Gretzky. What is that? We'll talk about that. But just to get it going here, we will talk about how the Capitals season starts Friday night. Finally, we can stop talking about last season. We can put that in the rear view. We can stop talking about what coulda, shoulda, woulda been. What is the start of the season Friday night. It all starts fresh for the Capitals. That is, a lot of other teams around the NHL have already got games in, but it is a clean slate for the Capitals, and it is going to be interesting. There are already people that have panned this team as not being contenders. I'm really excited for the Capitals to be able to prove a lot of those people wrong as they take on the Penguins, two teams that missed the mark of what they were looking for last season. Both teams are looking to rebound after missing the playoffs last season. Washington missed the playoffs last season for the first time since the 13-14 season. And you got to think, to a certain extent, that is why Peter Laviolette is no longer the head coach of this team. And in fact, I know it is. And I know that he is the one that volunteered to, cut ties with the team. He's the one that set up in the meeting. But all things considered, I didn't really understand it at first. But now, as the more I hear from players, I'm happy that they have a fresh start with Spencer Carberry, who just seems to be totally what the doctor ordered for this team, and the players on this team love him. I think this is the making of a perfect storm, if you will, for the Capitals, but there are already naysayers out there in The Athletic. Noted in September that the Capitals don't have much of a shot to do anything noteworthy this year other than get Ovechkin closer to the all-time record. As of Thursday afternoon, Odds Checker had Washington at plus 250 betting odds to make the playoffs. So already people that are panning the Capitals as this loser team. And ultimately, I don't care what The Athletic thinks anyway. It doesn't seem like they're in real good position right now, as most of their writers are jumping ship. So I really don't care what they have to say. And, one of the things that bugs me the most is these people that kind of just write about teams from afar. They're not really plugged in, and I talked about the other day where Frank Saravalli talked about, what are they going to get from Kuznetsov? And, just these comments that you would make if you weren't really following a team that close. And don't get me wrong, I love Frank Saravalli. I love the Daily Faceoff podcast, but sometimes I don't like when people pontificate on teams when they're not really plugged in. And I think that the Capitals are going to prove a lot of different people wrong. The odds makers, when they were talking about this team, they saw the roster the same as it was last year. They didn't see McMichael. They didn't see a lot of the young players that are coming up on this team. They didn't see the additions to this team. Some of those we won't see for a while, Patch Reddy and Joel Edmondson. but there are moves that were made, the addition of Spencer Carberry, which I think are certain metrics that they didn't quantify when they made their assessment. So it is going to be interesting, and I'm going to be excited when a lot of those quote unquote experts eat their room. Guys will have their game faces on Friday. Friday goaltender Darcy Kemper told the Washington Post, opening night's always a special one. And Darcy Kemper, of course, I expect to get the start unless he's injured or something like that, will be dialed in. He is a guy that can rise to the occasion. But what is the biggest addition to this team, far and above anything else they've done, is Spencer Carberry. While there are some new faces among the players, the fresh beginning starts with the first-year coach, Spencer Carberry, who is the youngest coach in the NHL at 41 years old. And sometimes I think there's a bit more of a rapport with a young coach, with young players. And young is a relative term. He's 41. He's still, I guess he's pretty close to Alex Ovechkin if you think about it. But for a lot of the younger players, there's still quite a gap there. But I think that it's not even his age. I think that Spencer Carberry, even 10 years older than what he is, just has the ability to resonate philosophically. I think he's on the same page as a lot of different players on this team. Most notably, Evgeny Kuznetsov. He's already kind of said that he feels like he's more comfortable working with Spencer Carberry over Peter Laviolette. So those are all big things. I think that if we can get a great season from Evgeny Kuznetsov, let's face it, a couple of years ago, he rounded out the top 3 in goals with Wilson and Ovechkin. We need a healthy and productive Evgeny Kuznetsov. I think that Spencer Carberry can be the Kuzi whisperer. It's going to be interesting to see, though, what they can get. Whenever you have a new coach and a new staff, there's always a breath of fresh air into the locker room. Caps winger Tom Wilson told the website here, the Hockey News, Carberry comes in and he's hungry, he's passionate. You feel the excitement when you talk to him. He brings an energy to the group that's exciting, and that nails it on the head to a T. Is just this positivity that exudes from him. But this is going to be one of the greatest games that'll happen all season, because like I said off the top, this is an arch nemesis of the Capitals. Sidney Crosby and Alex Ovechkin duking it out. You can expect a physical game from Alex Ovechkin, not necessarily the guy that gets that physical, even though he is not afraid to throw his weight around. I guess when I'm saying physical is, I mean, dropping the gloves. Don't really think that's going to happen, but I think that you are going to see skirmishes. I think you're going to see mix-ups in the corner with Crosby and Ovechkin. It's just those two lock horns like none other. So you can expect that. And they're, take a look at the Penguins. They have a lot to prove as well. There was a big cleaning of the house on that team as well. Different players, different managers, GMs, that kind of thing. So it's going to be interesting to see what they bring to the table. And I think that it is going to be a good litmus test for the Capitals if they can take down the Penguins, because a lot of people perceive that the Penguins are going to be that much better than the Caps. Is that going to be? Well, I guess we'll find out Friday night, won't we? Sometimes these odds makers don't really know. They trust AI and all these artificial metrics. Again, a lot of times when they pick these teams, it's based on the roster from the year before. Kind of a bit of an inside track for you guys there. So I don't think that that's already going to be an accurate thing to pick how this team's going to do. As for me, I have faith that they have what it takes in-house. And I think that this team is only going to get better as the season progresses. There will be the additions of Max Pacioretty. There will be the addition of Joel Edmondson. So I think that this team right now, minus those two players, is in a really good spot. With the addition of them, I think this is going to turn this team into a real force to be reckoned with. And that's what is exciting for me. Is we're looking to have a season with Tom Wilson healthy for the duration. Same goes for Carlson and Backstrom. Like I talked about on the show, and if you're an everydayer, that I talked about how much better would this Capitals team have been had they had those 3 huge pieces on this team. Not to mention, Ovechkin, who missed some time due to family issues, with the death of his father, and also, different ailments that he had, injuries and that kind of thing. So There are a lot of things to figure in when you take a look at this team last year that was not as successful as they had hoped for. The Capitals organization, and of course, the fans were hoping for. Of course, this team and their fans expect nothing less than success. One of the things that Darcy Kemper talked about at the end of the season was he said that he feels like he let the fans down. The Capitals team let the fans down. And I think that there is a real chip on the shoulder of a lot of different Capitals players that they want to prove that they are not just this old team that, go ahead and write us off. People have done it before. We're going to prove you wrong. And I think that ultimately they have what they need in the tank. Again, I guess we will find out Friday night. It is coming closer than anyone thinks. All right, so coming up here after the break, we will talk about Alex Ovechkin and how he has a whole lot more on his mind than just catching Gretzky. What is that something? I'll discuss next. Here's a bullet point regarding Jace Medical. The Jace case provides 5 life-saving antibiotics for emergency use. All it takes to get a Jace case is fill out a simple online form, and in some cases, jump on a quick call with one of our board-certified physicians. Get ongoing care from our physicians on any treatment-related questions. Doctor-created, doctor-recommended. Don't be caught unprepared. Everyone should be empowered to care for themselves and their loved ones during the unexpected. Jace handles everything from online evaluation to licensed pharmacy medication delivery and ongoing consultation and care. So that is why you need Jace Medical. Get $20 off on these life-saving antibiotics today from Jace Medical by using my code Locked On at checkout on jacemedical.com. That's JASE medical.com. All right, welcome back into this edition of Locked On Capitals, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. Make sure and subscribe or follow Locked On Capitals wherever you find your podcasts and on YouTube. The hockey season is here, and I've got you guys covered. So subscribe or follow Locked On Capitals today. All right, in this next segment here, we are going to talk about Alex Ovechkin and what is he looking forward to this year? Is he looking forward to getting closer to catching Gretzky? What is even more important than that is this team that he plays for, that he has the C on his chest for, the Capitals, being successful. That is what he cares about this year above and beyond anything else. I think that, him passing Gretzky at some point is going to be important, of course, but that is not what's important. He can see the hourglass. He can see that he has, roughly 3 years on this team to prove himself, and then his contract is over. Again, he could always sign an extension, but that is how he's fixing to be right now, is 3 years, and just father time as well. He's not getting any younger, so it's going to be more difficult as time goes on. So I do think that he does want to have success with his team that he's helped for so many years. He's been the captain of for so many years, but also he does want to catch Gretzky. I don't want to paint it in that light either, but I just want to play. Ovi recently told Tom Gliddy of the league's website, I just want to make the playoffs, and then we'll see what happens. And I think that if the team is successful, I think that if the team is winning games, then him scoring a bunch of goals just kind of comes with the territory. Ovi has only scored in the first game of the season 8 times during his career. However, he has done so in 4 of his last 6 season openers. So it is an interesting stat there that he's only scored in the first game of a season 8 times during his career. However, he has done it in 4 of his last 6 season openers. So kind of an interesting stat there. Ovechkin has been in the league. He started in the league 19 seasons ago. My, how time has flown. You think about how young you were 19 years ago. Some people that are listening to this maybe weren't even born, or, just a few years old. So Alex Ovechkin has been a fixture on this team for many years. And I think to a certain extent that some people take him for granted as this steady Eddie, this Russian machine that never breaks. and how he has helped contribute to this team. And like I've talked about on the show, people that get to see him on a night in and night out basis, whether it be in person at the rink or watching it on television, just really take a moment and take that all in, that you are witnessing history. At some point, he will catch and then pass Wayne Gretzky, and he will be the greatest goal scorer of all time. And you saw it in your lifetime on television or in person. And it's not this archival footage, some grainy VHS tape. This was in real time and you got to witness it. And don't let that ever wash over you. Don't ever take that for granted that you lived through that. I feel lucky to see him play every time I see him out on the ice. Ovechkin, who has scored at least 50 goals 9 times, opens this season with 822. That's 72 behind Gretzky, all-time record of 894. He scored 42 last season, a sign he's not slowing down. And he isn't, even though he turned 38 years old here somewhat recently, September. He's not slowing down. And people have kind of talked about him for years where he's had a bit of dips and dives throughout his career. And I remember I don't know, maybe 6-7 years ago when he wasn't playing that great, or he had like an off season. They were talking about how he looks like he put on weight. And maybe, can you guys believe this? They even said, should the Capitals trade Ovechkin? Oh, this is why you can't listen to these experts, because half the time they don't know what they're talking about. Of course, Ovechkin is a steady Eddie on this team, scoring all kinds of goals. And as the Capitals go, as Ovechkin goes, the rest of the team goes. So Ovi is the leader. That is why he wears the C on his chest. Per ESPN stats, Ovechkin finished last season with team highs of 42 goals and 75 points, tallied across 73 games, and he ended the campaign with 822. He also dealt with the death of his father and some injuries. That piece was there in the Hockey News. So he has been through a lot of different things in his career, and he has been through a lot last season, but he still found a way to persevere and help this team. And, even when he's injured, it's not usually for too long. He plays through a lot of pain, a lot of, uncomfortableness. He finds a way. Last year was probably the toughest year of my life because of what happened with my dad, but it's life, Ovi acknowledged. It happens to everyone, unfortunately, but from my standpoint, I just want to do my best year to bounce back and help our team to make the playoffs. That's our goal. And there's a lot of players on this team that's our goal. I know this segment we're talking about Ovechkin, but who else can you put in there? Someone that has been there by his side through most of the time is Nick Backstrom. Oftentimes they play on the top line, not so often in the last couple of years, but you are starting to see more and more chemistry during the preseason. And it's not just him, it's Oshie and it's Carlson and the guys that have been on the team for a long time. They're all wanting to prove to everyone what they have, and they're going to be able to do that with a healthy and productive Alex Ovechkin. Capitals forward Dylan Strome and forward Tom Wilson admitted to Tom Gliddy that they'll be thinking about Ovi closing in on Gretzky's mark throughout the season. However, the 38-year-old sounds disinterested in the topic as he prepares to see Crosby in the Pens on Friday night. Again, that is what he has spoke of for the longest time is, catching Gretzky and passing Gretzky is important. But for him, this team winning another cup during his era is what is important to him. We want to be in the playoffs. We want to fight for the cup. Ovi said about attempting to hoist the Stanley Cup for the second time during his Hall of Fame career. We want to feel that atmosphere and feel the intensity. Last year, lots of different reasons happened because of injuries and because we lost some points, but it's done. Nothing you can do about that anymore, right? So you just have to move on. And that is what I talked about off the top of the show, is putting the past in the past. They didn't make it to the playoffs last year. Okay, enough. Let's stop beating a dead horse. It's about this season, the 23-24 season. Since 2005, there's been a rivalry with Crosby. We know that. Yeah, it's always been nice to play against him. Ovi said he's a top player in the league, and that's a rivalry between me and Sid. And Caps and the Pens have always been top of the league for all the years. So there is a renewed energy, and I couldn't think of any other team the Capitals should play in the first game of the regular season than the Penguins. Very fitting, but it's not just the players. What does Carberry think on Ovi? Of course, he loves him. Number one is his leadership, and he carries a lot of that in the room. Head coach Spencer Carberry said players, veterans, and younger look to him and to lead by example from a standpoint of practice, from a standpoint of how hard he competes, to his play on the ice. I just expect to play to his standard, and that's being an effective player in all three zones for us to be able to get to good spots in the offensive zone, be a catalyst on our power play, make good decisions with the puck. That's what I want. Imagining he'll continue to do so. So that is why he is the leader of this team. That is why he's the captain. I don't think that anyone didn't understand that, but if you didn't understand it, that's why he leads by example. And sometimes people get into his position, especially these future Hall of Famers, and they're just like, yeah, kid, one day maybe you'll be as good as me. There's none of that with him. What is one of the things that we've seen with him is he took Ivan Miroshnichenko under his wing. That was very gracious of him, not something that he would necessarily have had to do, but that speaks volumes of his character. And that's ultimately what we love about Ovi. We love about how he is off the ice, how he's gracious with his time, how he's a leader, but at the end of the day, how he gets the job done, leading by example and scoring those really great goals. All right, so coming up here after the break, we will talk about a metric used to measure goals. It's called era adjusted goals. How does Alex Ovechkin figure into all of that? We'll discuss next. The NHL season is finally here. Capitals have the season we've been yearning for. I absolutely love the NHL, and I know you do too. And that's why I want to tell you about the Sleeper app. The Sleeper app is the official daily fantasy app of the Locked On NHL Network, and it's my go to for daily fantasy sports and especially daily fantasy hockey. With Sleeper, you can win 100 times your cash on daily fantasy. Fantasy sports is all the rage right now. That is why you need the Sleeper app. It makes watching the games that much more fun. Use promo code LOCKEDONNHL and you'll get up to a $100 match on your first deposit. Terms and conditions apply. That's Locked On NHL. See Sleeper's terms of use for more details. All right, welcome back into this edition of Locked On Capitals, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. So there was a piece that I was reading and preparing for this show in RMNB, Russian Machine Never Breaks, and they were talking about a metric called era adjusted goals. And how does Alex Ovechkin figure into that? It was an interesting piece. It was something that a term that I had not heard that much, so I had to do some reading up on it. But according to TSN, Ovechkin's next goal will give him 925 era-adjusted goals, tying Gordie Howe, not Gretzky, for the most of all time. And then they talk, what is an era-adjusted goal? Era-adjusted goals account for variables in the era that a player scored in. For example, he points out on a TSN article, Gretzky's 73 goals and 84-85 are equivalent to Ovechkin's 51 goals in the 13-14 season because of the 46% difference in league-wide scoring between these seasons. And, this is interesting that we're hearing more and more about, everyone reveres Gretzky as the greatest goal scorer of all time. But there's certain things that need to be factored in. He was the greatest goal scorer of all time from that era. How successful would Wayne Gretzky have been today? I think that he would have probably found a way to adapt his game to modern times, but that's a hunch, that's conjecture. What is one of the things that we know is early, many years ago, there were wooden sticks. And you take a look at the goalies, it was more of that flailing style, where now it's the butterfly style. You take a look at modern goalies, generally speaking, they're taller and more agile, and they make these athletic type plays that they didn't years ago. And oftentimes I will hear older people argue with me about that when I say that, modern goalies were better than older goalies, and they're saying, no way. Well, go ahead and watch the videos for yourself when they shoot the puck and the goalie just kind of kicked his leg. He didn't even, hunch down in like that butterfly style. So for me, that is what they're talking about, is different metrics. In this particular one in RMNB, they were talking about adjusted goals, era adjusted goals and what that means. And Alex Ovechkin is doing pretty good. Alex Ovechkin will begin his 19th season in the NHL and resume his chase of Wayne Gretzky. Goal record of 894. Ovechkin has 822.70 away from the immortal mark. But in this piece here, they're talking about where they are. So Gordie Howe in this metric here had 801. He had 801 goals. Era adjusted goals 925. Alex Ovechkin has 822 goals. Era adjusted goals is 924. If you take a look at Gretzky, who on records, shows that he is the all-time leader in goals scored. He had 894. Era adjusted goals was only 758. So there is a player between OV and Gretzky, and that's Jaromir Jagr, 766 goals, but era adjusted goals 841. So it is interesting that you're starting to see these different metrics. If you're a fan of baseball, you see a lot of different metrics that weren't there years ago. I mean, back then it was ERA and RBI and all that. Now there's WAR and all these other kind of different markings that they have in there. But it's interesting. It's all analytics at the end of the day, and just kind of, taking a look at sports and hockey in a different light than they did years ago. But it is interesting, and I do find that kind of data very interesting. The adjusted goal stat is based off the 82-game schedule with a maximum roster of 18 skaters and league averages of 6 goals per game and 1.67 assists per goal. So it is interesting, these different things that they're coming out, and it just seems like based on different metrics, not only is he number 2 in all-time goals scored, but you take a look at this adjusted goals, he's still doing really well. So I think that no matter what he does, I think that Alex Ovechkin is killing it, and I don't care what kind of metrics you use. At the end of the day, he will be the greatest goal scorer of all time. And, I think to a certain extent, just based on his nature, maybe from, the culture where he comes from in Russia, you don't really want to kind of pat yourself on the back and go, yeah, I am pretty great, ain't I? Yeah, Ovi, you're pretty good. No, I think that he takes the right approach by eating some humble pie and going, when I do it, I do it. I don't really care. My goal is to help this team. That's the right attitude to have. These guys that are all into themselves, that's really kind of disgusting, and it's horrible to listen to. So I'm glad that he has taken that approach. But at the end of the day, it doesn't matter what kind of metric you're using, whether it's era adjusted goals, if it's actual goals, whatever the case may be. I think at the end of the day, Alex Ovechkin will lead all of those. All right. I want to thank you for joining me on this edition of Locked On Capitals, your only daily year-round podcast covering the Washington Capitals. And I want to thank you all for listening and watching on a daily basis. You are what makes this podcast successful, and I have you to thank. All right, once again, I want to thank you for joining me on this edition of Locked On Capitals, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. My name is Dan Holme, and I'll talk to you again next time.